This professor lied about being indigenous. I forgot to say that I moved. I'm sorry. Moving vlogs coming soon. Hey, what's up you guys, and welcome back to my channel. Oh my gosh, today's video is gonna get a little messy, I'm assuming. I think I'm gonna call this, I haven't quite worked that out, but I think it's gonna be called the new age of pretendian, which pretty much it's somebody who's lying about being Native American, Indigenous, American Indian. I've been dying to talk about this phenomenon just because I think, to me, the new age of pretending is the hoes that are making Twitter accounts lying about being indigenous. I feel like I have like a talent for being able to tell that somebody on Twitter is lying about being indigenous, and they got a lot of people fooled. They got a lot, but not me. Obviously, it's not like I can just accuse people of lying about being indigenous because it's their word against mine, and who am I to say that they're, like, you know what I mean? So I haven't been able to talk about it, and I'm like, you know, maybe I am crazy for even thinking that, but now I'm like, it all makes sense. Oh, yes, we're gonna be talking about how she lied about being indigenous and how that was so weird and wrong on, you know, levels, but there's so much to the story that, like, we're gonna have to take a couple tangents, so please just bear with me. I'm gonna try to use my best storytelling skills. Anybody that knows me in real life knows I freaking suck at telling stories, so this is gonna be really awkward, but let's get into it. Today we're gonna be talking about one white woman in particular. Her name is Beth Ann McLaughlin. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but basically she was in I think her background is in neurology. She was like was it neurology? Neuroscience, sorry. Same difference, it's like the same thing. But so she was a neuroscience like professor or whatever, and she worked at Vanderbilt, which will come into play later in the story. Basically what Miss Girl did was make a fake Twitter account and a whole persona to go with it. This Twitter account called Sciencing By, and she basically was up on that account lying like her life depended on it. She lied about being indigenous among, you know, 20 billion other things.
Why the fuck you lying?
And we're gonna talk about it. Basically, where this story starts out, Miss Beth Ann was trying to get tenure at Vanderbilt. I don't know how best to explain tenure just because I've never worked in, like, I don't know, education. Pretty much the way I think of it is it's like academic freedom for professors. So like basically it's safety in their job, that they're not going to get fired over, like, I don't know what reasons people would get fired being problematic, but whatever the case is, I really don't know. Also, one thing that I did learn when I was looking into it, let me read this. Another reason why they would want to get tenure is pretty much if they don't get tenure at their institution at the latest possible date, they will have 1 year in their position and then they're going to have to leave the position. So like it seems like on one half you get, like, you know, freedom from being like fired or whatever the case may be, but on the other half, like, you kind of have to get tenure, otherwise you can't continue to work. I don't really know. I don't know. Now, what Miss Beth Ann was, she was an advocate for her group Me Too STEM, which, if you don't know what Me Too is, Google is, say it with me, free. Look it up, girl. If you don't know what Me Too is, educate yourself. What Beth Ann did was she, I guess, made a testimony against a former Vanderbilt professor, and said that she was sexually assaulted by them, which I don't know what the details of that investigation were or anything like that. But my point is, basically what had happened with her tenure is she did not get it. When she didn't get tenure, she pretty much came out and said that it was as retaliation from speaking out about, like, sexual assault. That's the first part of this that gets real interesting. Bear with me, we're gonna get into her lying about being indigenous. This is like the background, okay? The committee eventually came out and said the real reason why she didn't get tenure, and pretty much, first of all, her tenure process was halted because she was being investigated for, guess, derogatory tweets. Like, she was being racist online pretty much. So they ended up investigating, or like taking a little bit longer to investigate her tenure process. Eventually they went through and like reviewed all her work in her field, and they came to a conclusion. They voted unanimously against her tenure, and they were shaded with it, y'all. The reason she didn't get tenure was because her portfolio showed no impact in her field, and it didn't reflect being in the top of her field, which I would be vomiting, crying, bitter, sad, Oh my gosh. Imagine being burnt like that. Ooh, that had to have burnt. Anyways, now I don't know where in the timeline the account sciencing by comes from, because okay, so her tenure process, so here's the timeline of things. Her tenure process started, or it halted first in 2015. The sciencing by account popped up in 2016. And then the final decision was made in 2017, I'm understanding. So basically, I'm not 100% like sure if she already knew that her tenure was not gonna get granted and then she made the account, or where like that, you know, intent comes from. Now, from what I understand, it seemed like at first it was being used to promote at first like a petition for her to be granted tenure at Vanderbilt. The petition was like, oh, she is being unfairly fired because she spoke out against sexual assault, which later we come to find out was like, they fully just said, girl, you're not good enough to be given tenure, which is like shady, messy. She was engaging in like science Twitter conversations, which we'll get into why that was like very problematic. She also used the Twitter account to promote her Me Too STEM group. Well, I'm gonna talk a little bit about, because it shows you just how Beth Ann is as a person. So listen to this. One of the people that she worked with basically came out and said that she was like bullied by Beth Ann, and then other people that worked with the Me Too STEM came out and they basically said it was like a BS organization, and accused Beth Ann of frequent verbal abuse. The organization was dysfunctional. Like, for example, she made a GoFundMe behind everyone's back and no one knows where that $80,000 went. One thing that I think was like very, 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 very weird about this was like Harvard came out and said that there was a history of Title IX complaints, or Title IX sexual harassment complaints against 3 Harvard professors. And basically the Twitter account approached those victims and they were like, they came to them with like this story saying, oh, I did my PhD at Harvard, and then gave a sad story about how they suffered at Harvard, and basically said, oh, you should reach out to Beth Ann because she can help you. She would like reach out and get details of their story and use them to go get the sympathy and trust of other supporters and other victims. That sounds a little... Anyways, I don't know that she was or wasn't sexually assaulted. I can't really speak to the truth or lack of truth of that, so I'm not going to, but I'm pretty much just showing you what she was like up to on this Twitter account. She was like lying, like I said, her life depended on it. And this is where it gets real weird. Okay, now this is my main point as to why I am bothered by this whole creation of the Twitter account. So she said sciencing by was this indigenous, or she was Hopi, that's a specific tribe, and a professor at ASU who was being forced to work at ASU during the COVID-19 pandemic. She created this indigenous persona. She was like making up like all these crazy, I don't know, weird stories about being indigenous, which is like very funny to me because I'm like, you fully pulled that out of your ass. So pretty much, okay, she was on Twitter and she was like, she went on Twitter and she said that she had been asked by her dean whether she had taken a DNA ancestry test to prove her status as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or as a person of color, which this never happened because she's not an Indigenous person. Anyway, so she was on Twitter talking about, if people Venmo me money for day drinking, I may email them and ask if they have taken a DNA test to prove they are an asshole. She wrote, going on to ask, at Beth Ann, would you be Venmo, or would you be, or at Beth Ann, will you have it get sent to your Venmo so I don't have to break her anonymity? But basically my point is she like fabricated, like she would just say some weird shit. So she said that. Here, let me find the other things she said as an indigenous woman. Basically she was talking shit about white people, and I'm like, the call is literally coming from inside the house, ma'am. You are a white people. This is my main point. Okay, so remember how I said earlier that Beth Ann was like racist? From what I understand, like she was just rude as hell to people of color on Twitter. So I don't know exactly what language she was using. I tried to, you know, I don't know if you guys know what Wayback Machine is, but basically it's like an archive of old tweets and like web pages or what, I don't really know. And like usually you can see people's old tweets, but like for some reason you can't see any of Beth Ann's. You can see that the Twitter account existed, so it's not all a lie, but we can't find any like actual, any of the tweets other than like what little bit of like screenshots people have, which frickin' sucks. Now the most messed up part of this all was Beth Ann was here lying about being indigenous, and Beth Ann was over here fighting with people of color, And you know what she would do? Is she would call Sciencing Bai to come help her white homegirl Beth Ann be racist and like defend her. And do you not see the problem with that? She would like call on her. So, you know, somebody in one of the, I think the New York Times article made a really good point. So they talked about, I have person of color friends. Like, you know how people say, oh, I have a black friend, so if I say this or do this, then it's okay, which like, obviously it's not okay. Same thing, but like her saying, oh, I have an indigenous friend. So she would go be racist, go be rude, and then be like, I have an indigenous friend, I'm not racist, or whatever the case is. That's problematic, obviously, but Miss Girl invented her indigenous friend. She didn't have no indigenous friend, she made one up. Beth had basically created an indigenous sock puppet to defend her in her racist altercations, if you will, which is so messed up. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can't really give too many reasons about why, you know, defending your own racism is wrong, but also like it gives this, I don't even know how to explain it, but it kind of gives this false sense of like, it creates a false narrative around like indigenous people. So it basically paints this picture that indigenous people would be okay with racism and defending their racist friends, which obviously I can't speak for all indigenous people, but like for me, I'm not okay with that. And I get annoyed because people will like create these indigenous personas and then just go be problematic as fuck, and it looks so bad on the rest of indigenous people because it makes us all look like we're problematic like that. And I'm like, I'm not like that. I do not want to be represented by somebody like that. But it's also really bad because she engaged in like these science Twitter conversations. As a native indigenous person, it's already hard to be in the realm of the sciences, but it's also like your perspective is so beneficial, so meaningful, because we don't occupy these spaces anyway. But for her to take advantage of that and to speak on things from her native perspective as a white woman, do I need to explain why that's wrong? Because I feel like I don't. Now the story gets even weirder. So now we know she's sciencing, Beth Ann created Sciencing Bai. She's on there lying. She's trying to be indigenous and getting people to send her money and to freaking join her organization that does, I don't know what they do, because everyone that's come out has said it's a BS organization. So she's trying to get people to join her BS organization, trying to make money, trying to, I don't know. I really don't know what she's trying to do. You guys are not going to believe how she got caught up. No one knew. I would have known. I didn't know of the Twitter account, but if I had seen this account, I would have to see 2 posts and I would just know that this girl is lying. But anyways, so she went unchecked. She went unchecked for like, I don't know how long, but I think it was years. And you will not believe how she got caught up. Sciencing Bai was like, oh, I have COVID-19, which obviously is a very problematic thing, and like also very probably traumatizing to actual indigenous people, because native communities have been hella affected by COVID-19. Basically like tweeted pretending like she was battling it for months. And then eventually, this was like couple months long lie, mind you. And then to top it all off, Beth Ann comes out and Beth Ann's like, sad to announce that Sciencing Bai died, blah, blah, blah. People were like, obviously, oh my gosh, freaking an indigenous woman who's a professor at ASU died. And because, okay, so what Sciencing Bai said was, she said she got COVID from working in person, being forced to work in person by ASU, which obviously people like felt real bad about it, and everyone was trying to track down this Hopi ASU professor that died from COVID-19, which ASU eventually came out and said, none of our faculty, none of our staff, no professor died, so we don't know what this is, but I feel they were like trying to do their due diligence and identify them, which at that, to me, somebody that's Hopi and, you know, works at ASU, I feel like that's enough identifiable information where you can narrow it down to at least, you know, like less than 5 people, I would assume. ASU did say like their structure is like unique to where if somebody were to make a lie up like that, they could get away with it just because of, I don't know, their structure is really weird. So if you work for one of their departments, you don't have to work like specifically in that department. You could work for like a science center or something and still be considered under that department, if that makes sense. Anyways, that's how she was able to lie about it. So she killed Miss Sciencing Bai, and then Miss McLaughlin, her bestie, was like, oh my god, I'm so sad. She is dead. I'm so sad. Then she was like, let's have a vigil. And so she hosted a vigil over Zoom where 2 people came. Okay, I just want to know what the energy on that call was, because one of the professors that was on the call said it took like a good 5 minutes to figure out that sciencing Bai could not be a real person. It literally took them like 5 minutes, and that it was Beth Ann. Like, he figured it out in 5 minutes. And the other one came out and said it was like weird, which the weirdest shit went down. And then it got real weird because she said that Beth Ann said that sciencing Bai revised their will so that Beth Ann would be in it, which is like, why would you make that up? You're a pathological liar if you just make something like that up off your head. Like, did she think about it while she was in bed at night? Like, oh, I'm gonna tell everyone that she revised her will and put me in it. Why would you even make that up? Why? How did you come? Did it just pop up in your head and you're like, let me tell this lie? Or did you like really think on that lie and think it was gonna be a good idea to tell that lie? I really don't know. Basically, it sounds like it was a weird energy on that call. I would have loved to have been on that Zoom call, because could you imagine? She fully lied about being Indigenous. There was a bunch of other stuff that came in between. I feel like trying to explain why lying about being Indigenous is very hard for other people to understand. But I'm like, you're using it to your benefit, to gain something, whereas like you're pretty much taking, you know, space from actual Indigenous people, actual Indigenous voices. I feel like I don't even have to really fully delve into why this is wrong. On one hand, the lying was wrong because it's like you're taking up space and voices of Indigenous people, but on the other hand, she was fully using this Indigenous presence to defend her racist actions, and it just kind of reflects bad back on Indigenous people. Like, I don't know, that really does not sit right with me, and I feel like we need to start talking about these things more. I'm dead that she got caught up. I don't really know. This whole story is so messy. I feel like I probably missed some details, so I'll link the articles that I was using as references in the description if you want to read them. As always, thank you. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, turn on the bell, press notifications, and turn it on. Like it, give it a huge thumbs up. Bye.